Park Slope! From 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 Park Slope!
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Residents of this part of Queens assembling tonight from Maspeth, Glendale, Middle Village, and other parts for coming to the very location where 5 years ago the community was able to repulse de Blasio and his homeless services czar, Stephen Banks, from putting into place a homeless shelter here at the Holiday Inn for single able-bodied men. The community successfully stopped that. But thereon, de Blasio and Stephen Banks retrenched their efforts, and they decided no more transparency, no more meetings with communities, no more informing local officials, whether they were the local city council person, state assembly person, state senator, or members of the community board. From then on, it was simply design the shelter conversion, impose it overnight, no transparency, no discussion. Now you're stuck with a shelter. And months afterwards, just blocks from here, in Glendale, along Cooper Avenue, it was a facility that originally had been an industrial production facility. It was converted overnight into a shelter for single able-bodied men. We'll discuss what happened in a bit. But a proposal was made by City Councilman Robert Holden. We need a public school for special need kids. We need a school for special need kids. There was no doubt about that. Stephen Banks superseded the Department of Education and imposed the shelter on the people of Glendale and Middle Village. And it's been that way in the last 2 years, in what I call a reign of non-transparency, in which all of a sudden, overnight, buses will show up with single able-bodied men or single able-bodied women, and they'll be pushed into shelters that have been turned and repurposed from commercial facilities, or as in the case of the Holiday Inn, a hotel in an outer borough. 90 options to have homeless shelters in neighborhoods that were never consulted, that never had any conversations. And that trek towards 90 continues. No more shelters in the neighborhoods. No more shelters in the neighborhoods.
No more shelters in the neighborhood!
So recently, Eric Adams, the Democratic nominee to become mayor, indicated in an interview that he was not only happy with the performance of Stephen Banks, he wanted to keep him on.
What? Are you crazy?
He said he provided excellent service to the city. That stunned people in neighborhoods that have had these shelters forced upon them. And he did not retrench. He did not back up. He doubled down as part of his quid pro quo deal with Bill de Blasio, who silently behind the scenes pushed all the buttons to make sure that Eric Adams would become the Democratic nominee. Stephen Banks would become the czar of homeless services again if Eric Adams is elected mayor. And then to add insult to injury, earlier today, Eric Adams called up the incoming governor, Kathy Hochul, who will assume the duties of governor in 2 weeks. And he requested a meeting with the incoming governor to encourage her to sign a state bill that would allow outer borough hotels to be used for mental health clinics and homeless services. victory 5 years ago here in preventing the Holiday Inn, I might add, one of the many friends of de Blasio, the owners, who were able to get sweetheart contracts from the Department of Homeless Services, will enable the Holiday Inn either to become a provider of mental health services for the emotionally disturbed, or become once again a homeless shelter for either single able-bodied men or single able-bodied women. All your hard work would be for naught. And it would be a state bill that would do this. When I'm elected mayor, this will end.
Yes, sir. Yes.
$2.1 billion is spent each year for homeless services. And what do they succeed in doing? Warehousing men, women, and families. That's all it is. You're in by 10 o'clock at night. That's the curfew. You get kicked out the door at 7:30 to roam the neighborhoods that you've been put into, many of whom never came from those neighborhoods. It creates an adversarial situation with your neighbors and those who are now clients of the Department of Homeless Services, and it's led to many, many problems. Few, if any, services are provided. Many of these men and women have serious alcohol problems, serious drug addictions, serious emotional and mental health problems, and they're receiving no services. All it is a warehouse. And I ask you this, how is the homeless situation since Bill de Blasio was elected mayor?
Worse. Disaster. All time worse.
Has it gotten better?
No.
Has Stephen Banks helped solve the problem?
No.
Has he made it worse?
Yes.
So why the hell, Eric Adams, will you want to continue with Stephen Banks as the failed head of the Homeless Services Program of Bill de Blasio?
Dump the dope. Dump the dope.
Out of all the blunders made by the de Blasio administration, by the way, he's on vacation this week with all the problems that we have. Vacation for a week in Massachusetts and Maine. Maybe he would do us a favor, exit stage left, and take a permanent vacation this week and not come back.
Speak to it, Curtis. Speak to it. Dump the dope from Park Slope. Dump the dope from Park Slope. Dump the dope from Park Slope. Dump the dope from Park Slope.
I remember listening to Stephen Banks, the author of this failed homeless policy, say in 2017 that they were turning the tide on the homeless situation in New York City. Turning the tide. Well, guess what? The tide has become a tsunami. The city streets, parks, and subways are filled with homeless people who are not being provided services. Instead, they're being warehoused. And now you have Eric Adams, whose first call to the incoming governor, Kathy Hochul, is to beseech her, beg her, to sign state legislation that would allow hotels like the Holiday Inn to house homeless men or homeless women, or provide mental health services to the emotionally disturbed. We'll be going backwards instead of forwards. I say to you, as the mayoral challenger to Eric Adams, over my dead body. Over my dead body.
Over my dead body.
Now, at this point, I remember being involved with all of you here 5 years ago.
Yes. Thank you, Curtis. Thank you.
I remember how de Blasio and Stephen Banks took umbrage to you actually organizing and bringing together blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians, males, and females around this subject matter. They called you racist.
That's right.
They called you racist.
Call me a racist.
And the community rejected that label.
Yes, sir.
And in fact, this community went out and started helping other communities of not just white or Asians, but people of color in black and Hispanic neighborhoods to fight the fact that there was no transparency in the shelters that were forced on their neighborhoods. Maspeth led, other neighborhoods followed, and now Maspeth must lead again 5 years later.
Yes, sir. Yes.
But even ahead of Maspeth, there was the first demonstration I remembered. I was there. Queens Boulevard.
Right.
The famous Pan Am Hotel used to be the place where the stewards and stewardesses and airline pilots would be housed when they would take flights into LaGuardia and JFK. And then overnight, it was turned into a homeless shelter, representing the people who demonstrated there every day and who came here to help the people of Maspeth and later on Glendale and Middle Village protest the homeless shelter being shoved into their neighborhoods, is Phil Wong, president of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. Phil?
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Yes, Curtis was there and I was there back at 2014. We're in the middle of the night. Several buses bussed in, a couple hundred people into the Pan Am shelter. And overnight, the hotel was full with homeless families from all over. And I live right behind the Pan Am, so I had front row seats. And next day, there were about 70 kids who went straight to the local public school asking the principal for a seat so they could start school. The principal don't have seats. In fact, there are no desks, there are no books, there are no supplies for the kids. They were stuck in the auditorium, they were stuck in the cafeteria for 3 months, while the Department of Education had to order the supplies because they didn't know that they were coming. We protested because, one, Pan Am don't have the services required for the homeless families. They don't have the health care services they need. They don't have the facilities for job training. They don't even have Wi-Fi. In fact, when there was a lockdown last year, when the kids had to stay inside the shelter to do remote learning, the building has no Wi-Fi. Pan Am did not install Wi-Fi until last month. Go see it yourself. The contractor's van is there, still putting up Wi-Fi. This is the epic failure that we're here to tell you today. Stephen Banks' 7 years as commissioner is an epic failure. Not just in Pan Am, not just here Holiday Inn, not just in Middle Village, but all over the city. The entire city of New York's homeless policy is a failure.
Banks gotta go!
Banks gotta go!
Banks gotta go!
Banks gotta go!
Banks gotta go! Banks gotta go!
Banks gotta go!
Banks gotta go! Banks gotta go!
Make no mistake, the shelter is
Absolutely.
they're making money from the homeless.
Big money, big money. Big money.
Instead of giving them the money and, hey, go rent the apartments. Go rent the condos. There are plenty of vacant ones. Instead of doing it, they want to keep people in the shelter system, and they have no intentions of saving them or helping them to get out.
They want them there longer.
They want them there as long as possible so they can milk the city of our money, of our tax dollars that we're stuck paying for many decades to come. They don't care if there's a deficit, what if it's a $5 billion, $6 billion deficit, right? They will borrow, they will keep borrowing, and we'll be stuck with the bill. And that's exactly what's happening. Our property taxes are going up, our parking tickets are going up, our all sorts of taxes we have never heard of, congestion tax, permits, whatever, all that is going up at our expense. And meanwhile, what do you see? You see homeless under the LIE. You see the homeless in the subways. You see the homeless sleeping in parks. You see the homeless sleeping every single corner when there is shelter. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So we are looking at outright abuse of our tax dollars. We're talking about systems of failed for the last 7 years. Okay, and we're here to say Stephen Banks has to go.
Stephen Banks has to go.
Stephen Banks has to go.
Stephen Banks has to go. Stephen Banks has to go.
Stephen Banks
Has to go.
Stephen Banks
Has to go.
Stephen Banks
Has to go.
Stephen Banks
Has to go. Stephen Banks
has to go. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Now to speak about the failed effort to stop a shelter overnight from being imposed on the community in nearby Glendale is Charlie V., who has been at every one of these meetings and events, has helped rally the people, and has traveled to other neighborhoods throughout the 5 boroughs to spread the word. But Charlie, if you'd be kind enough to tell the story of how difficult it was in Glendale when all you simply wanted was a school for special ed children.
Disgusting. Disgusting.
Charlie!
They came to Maspeth and they thought they forced this shelter on us. But they had another thing coming. Because the people of Maspeth know how to fight. And we fought, and we were out here, and we fought Stephen Banks and his corrupt policies of housing the homeless. And then we won. What did they do? They changed the scheme. They said, now we're going to sneak these things in there. And they tried to sneak a shelter in Glendale. But Councilman Holden said that site would be great for a brand new school for special needs children. A state-of-the-art school. Brand new. Unlike the crumpled school they have now. He proposed this. But Stephen Banks and Chancellor Carranza said, instead of having a brand new state-of-the-art school for special needs children, we want to put this homeless shelter in the community.
Shame on him.
How could they put the developers and the people that run the homeless shelters to get their millions and millions of dollars before the needs of our children? De Blasio doesn't care about the children.
Of course not.
And Stephen Banks doesn't care about the children.
Absolutely.
All they care about is this warped ideology and the money their friends are going to make.
Absolutely.
So when you look at that and you say, why would Stephen Banks why would Eric Adams say he wants to keep Stephen Banks?
Unbelievable.
Well, Eric Adams wants De Blasio's help. And De Blasio leaves office, he's going to need a job. And if Stephen Banks is homeless commissioner, boy, there'll be a lot of money going to De Blasio's friends.
That's right. The dirty money.
And don't you think Eric Adams won't get a piece of that either?
That's right. Yes, sir, Charlie. Talk.
What we need is to get rid of Stephen Banks and his corrupt homeless policy, which has done nothing to help the homeless, has put more homeless on the street, more homeless in shelters, and more homeless in hotels.
Absolutely, Charlie.
And there's only one way to get rid of Stephen Banks and his corrupt policy, and that's to elect Curtis Sliwa.
Curtis for the community.
And let me just repeat after what Charlie just said. Today, Democratic candidate for mayor Eric Adams said that he had had a conversation with incoming Governor Hochul, Kathy Hochul, who assumes the responsibilities in 2 weeks. He wants to meet with Hochul and encourage her to sign state legislation that would allow out-of-borough hotels, like what we see behind us, and others throughout Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Staten Island. Notice no mention of Manhattan, outer boroughs. To be turned into homeless services shelters. And to mental health care facilities for the emotionally disturbed. That's not what these hotels and motels were built for.
Right.
That's what they should not be repurposed into. And why is it that Eric Adams is lobbying for the men who are friends of Bill de Blasio, who profited over the last 8 years from the repurposing of hotels to homeless shelters. Let's look at the role of donors to Eric Adams' campaign and see if these men's names appear on the CFB rolls as beneficiaries of the future of a potential mayoralty of Eric Adams when he converts these hotels into shelters because of state legislation. On that note, that's why you got to elect local officials who are going to be the impediment to that. Our next speaker, Marvin Jeff Coates from Woodside, running for city council. Marvin.
I think it was Einstein that said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. If you can't see the writing on the wall, electing Eric Adams is another de Blasio administration. Keeping banks in there is continuing de Blasio's administration. But Boo is right. But it's something more sinister than just making money. Who does things in the middle of the night without the light of day, without consulting the people in a democratic republic?
Criminals!
Exactly. So, I'm sorry. De Blasio and the rest of them know they've done things that are prosecutable. And that's why they do things in the middle of the night. Now, we've heard the success story here about Maspeth and Bob Holden and the leadership they had in Maspeth. I'm from right across the LIE in Woodside, and we didn't have that kind of leadership. We didn't have that kind of success story. I ran against Jimmy Van Bramer last time, and unfortunately I lost. I think we know why now. And I think we know why they're willing to come out and tell us what they're going to do. They're telling us that they're going to continue the same insane nonsense that they've been doing. There must be a reason for it. They must know something we don't know, right?
That's right.
Well, we need to get out and vote, get Curtis and myself and others in there to make sure that doesn't happen. But over in Woodside, because Jimmy didn't stand up for the community, they put a hotel in on the other side, on Queens Boulevard, on the other side of Calvary Cemetery. And sadly, I have to look at an old woman or her son tell me that in that homeless shelter that's supposed to be for single mothers, they got working age males in their Cadillacs and in their Mercedes parked outside, throwing the ball against the wall because that shelter, that homeless shelter, that hotel abuts next to her private property. And the lady can't get any peace. And she's frightened to death to come outside and say, the lady's 80 years old. And she's frightened to death to come outside and say, please knock it off because of what they might do to her. She has to smell the stench of marijuana. By the way, I live on 45th Street. I got to smell the same thing. And I'm tired of it. All right?
We're all tired of it.
I got another friend that tells me about a lady that has to sit in a coffee shop all day long while her husband goes to work because they're the working poor and they're clients of the homeless shelter system. But she's afraid of being accosted inside the homeless shelter. Their whole thing is not reintegration and bringing people into society. If you think back when de Blasio said he's going to bring it to your neighborhood, we all here work hard for what we have, to own property and pay taxes for services. And he said he's going to take that away from us, like Curtis said earlier, over my dead body. I pay those taxes. I put my wife and kids in that home, and I go to work every day to slave to make sure that they have a safe environment away from what I had to grow up for when I was in Harlem and the Bronx.
Absolutely.
I don't want that, and I don't want it for other people's kids too. I'm not bashing the homeless, but they don't care about the homeless. If they cared, they're abusing them is right because it's a money-making scheme. How can you, the way out of poverty is education.
That's right.
My biological mother, rest in peace, she taught me that, and I worked hard. I did 22 years in the Army, and I went to college, and I got an education, and that's how I got the job I got, and that's what I want for every kid in New York City.
Absolutely.
But how can you educate your child in a homeless shelter when there's no stove? There's no stove. How can you cook a decent meal for that kid to learn? We're talking about Wi-Fi. If a kid is hungry, they're not concentrating on the lesson plan. What are they going to do? Go to McDonald's? And then, oh, by the way, they're going to say that McDonald's is racist because they cater to black neighborhoods or minority neighborhoods. Nonsense. But when they build these homeless shelters, they put them across the street from McDonald's and they give them a voucher to guess where? Not the Pathmark supermarket or associated to a McDonald's so they can eat hamburgers that, by the way, if you leave that hamburger out, it won't disintegrate. All right? That's what they want to feed our school kids. It's got to stop. The purpose is not reintegration into the community. If you notice that these shelters going up overnight in the middle of the night without any oversight coincided with closing up Rikers, bail reform where there's no cash bail, and defunding the police. Their goal, besides protecting themselves by keeping the administration going, because they'll be the prosecutors, their goal is to keep these homeless shelters going and to keep you in constant fear. All right? I don't know where all you stand on the Second Amendment, but I'm an American. I served my country 22 years, and I'll trust any law-abiding American with a firearm above the criminals that have them now. But they take away your right to self-defense, and they won't tell you. We have the best police department in the world, but no police department is obligated to protect any one citizen. Meanwhile, the mayor has a personal security detail. But you can't protect yourself. Most of them don't probably want to be on it, right? And when a Democrat passes a law about gun control, the only people listening is us, because them criminals, they didn't get their gun lawfully. But the purpose of these homeless shelters, the purpose of bail reform, the purpose of closing Rikers and putting them out on the streets so they go into the shelters, because that's who a lot of these shelters on Queens Boulevard are servicing. And the purpose of defunding the NYPD is to intimidate you into being afraid and totally dependent on the government. All right? I told you, they want to take what you earn. All right? It's no shame in being poor. We're all only one paycheck away from being poor. I'm not disparaging them. What I want to do is I want to grab those young kids and lift them up and say, hey, buddy, this might not work for you, but this is how I did it. And that's what I want for all of our kids. But they don't want that. They want a continuous stream of homeless people so that they can victimize them. They want a continuous stream of convicts so that they can take away all their rights, because once you go in the system, they take away your rights. And the new scam is they couldn't blame defund the police, and this happened across the nation, by the way. The socialists timed this across the nation. They felt their time was right. Obama teed it up for them, and they went out on steroids. The socialist agenda is to keep you scared and take away your rights. So what we've got to do is we've got to go and we've got to protect the polls. We've got to make sure that the vote count is ballot. I'm for paper ballots. I don't like the machines. If you see what's going on, and see, I know we're getting off the subject of homeless shelters, but in order to stop issues like this, we have to have a protected vote. You got to get me and Curtis and the rest of the Republican candidates in there. Voting Democrat is totally insane.
Protect our vote.
God bless you all, and I'll see you in November.
And our final speaker, the total opposite of Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and by the way, he still is Brooklyn Borough President. He's not the mayor. He's not the Mashiach. He's not the Messiah. He's not the new face of the Democratic Party. He's a borough president. Although he's been Mr. Smith go to Washington more often than he's been in the city, he's still a borough president. And a borough president represents the people of that borough. And I remember, because I knew the borough president very well, that the borough president did not stand with you when you fought off the development of the Holiday Inn.
That's right. That's right.
To a homeless services hotel. Nor did most of the other elected officials.
That's right.
They were missing in action. That's why in this election cycle, Donovan Richards will actually encourage the movement of homeless and emotionally disturbed into hotels, because he is a supporter of Eric Adams. The opposite is the borough president candidate for Queens, Tom Smith, who will talk to us right now about what he would do about a situation like this.
Tom.
Thank you, Curtis. Thank you, Phil Wong, Charlie Veruska, for inviting me here. Everyone, my name is Thomas Mitch. I'm running for borough president on the Republican, Conservative, and Save Our City line. We have a serious problem here. Of course, you see this. It's been going on for 8 years. We do not want our quality of life that we used to remember 8 years ago, what was here in Queens and in our city. The mayor has destroyed it. The elected officials from a certain party, I'll call them Democrats, have a supermajority here that have voted to close Rikers. They voted to destroy your neighborhoods with the homeless shelter system. It is very simple. Who remembers going back? We're going to make New York a sanctuary city under Obama, a sanctuary cities around America. Every single one of them is destroyed now. Every single one. And we're allowing it to happen, but not all the way. But now we need everyone else, which is the reason why I'm running, to stand and fight like Curtis is and Marvin here today, because we have to get off the couch. We have to get involved. It is not government entitlement. It is your tax dollars that are paying for this. Who is going to hold de Blasio's wife accountable for this $875 million for the Thrive program? That's our tax money. I can guarantee you, if I am elected, that I will work with Curtis and Marvin and everybody else in the city council, find out where that money went and hold criminal charges. We will get, lock them all up, that's right, because we will get an independent investigation, like they used to call on everybody else years ago. But notice lately, there are no more independent investigations because they're all in on it. They're all getting a piece of it. Now you need to decide for yourself what you want for the future of your children, especially here in Queens. Queens, think about Queens. We have the National Tennis Center. We have a baseball team. We have a casino. We have racetracks. We have 2 major airports. You cannot come into New York without coming through Queens. And now they want to build the tramway. There was resistance to that. We got to move to the future. All right, the Rockaway line needs a lot of work. There's money. They'll find money for the homeless all of a sudden and all of these other people. But that line has been sitting there for 62 years, not being used. And Woodhaven Boulevard, you try to drive down, forget it. You know what they did? They improved it. They added traffic cameras and red light cameras. That's how they improved it, so they could take more money from you. We're going to eliminate that. Curtis had said that previously. And we're going to bring back Queens to be great again, the way it was in 1964 with the World's Fair here when they built up everything, right? I was born that year, so I don't really remember it, so it must have been a good year if I was born that time, okay? And there was prosperity because this was all farms here, okay, and cemeteries. Now we build it all up. But I want to tell you something. You got to remember, we were out at a homeless shelter in Fresh Meadows last year. When they had everything was fine. All of a sudden, there was a spike in crime in the neighborhood. Nobody could figure out what was wrong. They had taken the prisoners from Rikers and housed them in there at $275 a night, the whole building, okay? And they were robbing the people on that block.
Disgusting.
And that's how everybody found out what was going on. And guess what happened? We went out there, we protested, but suddenly all and every single elected official in Queens, I'm talking Congress on down, congressmen and assembly people and the state senators, all denied that they knew anything about it. And then, as you can remember, I do, the New York Post had, even Mayor de Blasio didn't know nothing about it. They all denied it. They denied everything. And this guy Banks is in charge of all of that. They're all in cahoots. We got to get rid of every single established politician that's been in there throughout this administration. And that's up to you people if what you want for your future. That's why I am running, okay? Somebody has to run. You have to get it inside yourself that this is your future. Like Ronald Reagan said, if this falls, this whole city and this country, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. Where are we going to go? And I like what Marvin said about the Second Amendment, okay? I believe, like Marvin does, I'm a veteran of the first Gulf War. I believe that you have a right to protect yourself according to the Constitution. If the cops don't want to come, or they ignore your 911 call, or your grandmother's on the street, you have a right to protect yourself, your kids, and your future. And thank you very much. I'm going to cut it short, But make sure you vote, and remember, and tell your neighbors, your friends, your family. We have people running that can try to change this mess that was made by de Blasio and Banks and all of those cronies that are up there in City Hall. Okay? Remember, everyone who's in office is the one who voted to close Rikers. $12 billion. $12 billion. Can you imagine what we could do with that money here? Okay? They want to build jails that are not going to be ready for 10 years. All right, and we could use Rikers Island, house some of these homeless there, have apprentice programs, because I'm a union member, 37 years, I'm retired. We can hook up with the unions, make agreements with them, and get people in training for anything, learning how to sew, do anything. You could teach somebody to do anything, but they have to want to do it. But if you take their incentive to want to do anything by just telling them to stay home and giving them a check and paying everything for them, what does that lead to? You know what that leads to. I mean, come on. But we need to get out there and vote this November, because the next year, too, there's another big election, and then the next year. But everybody's been too complacent, sitting back. I fought with Charlie Veruska and Phil Wong. We got rid of Carranza, finally. Finally. Okay? And we want tuition vouchers. We want a good education for our kids. Okay? We want the gifted and talented programs. We want the specialized test. Okay? This is what I stand for, and where I stand with these good other politicians that are running to save your quality of life. That's what you have to remember. Thank you very much.
Yes. Tom.
Banks gotta go! Hey, ho! Banks gotta go! Hey, ho! Banks gotta go! Hey, ho! Banks gotta go!
Well, in closing tonight, in celebration of the 5th anniversary of the one community that was able to repel the placement of a homeless shelter for single able-bodied men here at the Holiday Inn, Maspeth, with help from nearby Middle Village, Glendale, and other surrounding communities. A bigger task is now upon us. I have to ask you, Phil, who led the effort with many of your fellow neighbors on Queens Boulevard, even before this effort was successful, to stop the conversion of the Pan Am Hotel, an iconic location on Queens Boulevard, from being converted overnight to a homeless shelter for families. And I got to ask you, Charlie, who've been in the forefront of dealing with so many, to stop shelters from being overnight placed in their communities. Under de Blasio and Stephen Banks, the failed Commissioner of Homeless Services, there are now planning to be finished 90 separate shelters throughout the 5 boroughs. 90. They're already more than 2/3 of the way towards accomplishing their goal. None of them were discussed with the community. There was no transparency, wasn't even in any discussions with the elected officials. We've got to warn communities now there will be a second wave if Eric Adams is elected mayor. And that's the breaking news. He signaled today that with Kathy Hochul, Lieutenant Governor, assuming the obligations of being the governor of the state of New York in 2 weeks from Andrew Evil Eyes Cuomo. Good to see you go, Andrew. But on his desk, we learned today, is a piece of legislation, state legislation, already passed, that will allow the state to supersede the city. Because remember, we don't have home rule. The state controls many of the decisions that are made in the 5 boroughs. If that legislation is signed by the governor, this hotel could be converted into a homeless shelter again, or a mental health facility to deal with the emotionally disturbed. So the hand of time will be turned back, and the process will be started all over again under Eric Adams, with his homeless czar, Stephen Banks, that he thinks did an excellent job. So I will join you, Phil. I will join you, Charlie, and all of your neighbors and friends. We've got to be like Paul Revere. We've got to warn every neighborhood in the 5 boroughs what is coming if I lose and Eric Adams wins. And more importantly, we have to have the battle cry ready. We will improve. We will not move. We will improve. We will not move. We will improve. We will not move.
We will not move.
So, we know what we have to do. You did it 5 years ago successfully, but you can't rest on your laurels. This hotel, the Holiday Inn, owned by a friend of de Blasio, once again may be repurposed into either a homeless shelter for single able-bodied men or to care for emotionally disturbed persons who have serious mental health issues. That's what Creedmoor is for in the other part of Queens. That's what Kings County is for. That's what Bellevue is for. That's what Kirby Psychiatric is for in Randall's Island. These are facilities that take care of the mentally ill, get them their medication, and begin to normalize them so they can be integrated back into society. Warehousing the emotionally disturbed in a hotel like this serves no one, neither the emotionally disturbed or the surrounding community, likewise with single able-bodied men or women. So let's unite again in the cause of us and we, not I and me. Let's not be pitted against one another like de Blasio has loved to do by race, by ethnic group, by neighborhood, by borough. If there's a problem in Staten Island, it's Queens' problem. If there's a problem in Manhattan, it's Brooklyn's problem. And the borough with the most shelters per capita per person is the borough I started the Guardian Angels in 1979, 42 years ago. Let's not forget the borough most burdened with homeless shelters, the Bronx. Let's make sure we go out there and prevent this from happening again. Thanks for coming here tonight. Great to celebrate the victory. But the battle continues. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate that.